My best friend, Sophia, set me up on a nightmare date to prove a point, then told our friends I was too picky to be happy. She thought she had successfully painted me as a lonely spinster. So, I thanked her for her concern and set a trap she never saw coming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The fluorescent lights of the office bathroom hummed, each buzz amplifying the frantic thumping in my chest. I leaned against the cool tile of the stall, my phone clutched in a hand that trembled slightly. It wasn't the stress of the building proposal deadline or the lack of sleep that had sent me fleeing from my desk. It was a single, vibrating notification from a group chat innocently named Weekend Warriors. The message was from Sophia, my best friend, my ride or die since we were awkward teenagers navigating high school hallways. The text itself was dressed in sympathy, a masterclass in feigned concern. "Guys, I feel so bad for Alice," it began, accompanied by a sad face emoji. "I really thought Greg would be great for her, but I guess she just wasn't feeling it. I don't know what to do anymore. I try so hard to help her, but she's just so picky." My breath hitched. Picky. The word was a small, sharp dagger. It was the same word she had used last month when I turned down a job offer that would have required me to move across the country. "You're too picky, Alice. It was a good offer." It was the same word she'd used when I decided against adopting a dog from a shelter because the animal was clearly terrified and needed a more experienced owner. "You're just looking for excuses. You're too picky." The replies from our friends started to trickle in, each one a fresh twist of that dagger. "You did your best, Soph. She'll find someone eventually. Don't worry about it." "Classic Alice, lol. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped." That last one, from a guy I'd considered a close friend, sent a wave of nausea through me. My fingers felt numb as I scrolled up, rereading the conversation. The blind date with Greg hadn't just been a mismatch, it had been a catastrophe. He'd spent 2 hours talking about the superiority of his stock portfolio, insulting the waiter, and explaining to me, an architect, why the design of the restaurant we were in was fundamentally flawed from a layman's perspective. He'd checked his phone every 5 minutes and had the audacity to ask if I was always this quiet. I had extracted myself from the date with as much grace as I could muster, sending Sophia a polite text afterward. "Hey, thanks so much for the thought, but we just didn't click. Hope you have a great night." Her reply had been a simple, "Oh, okay, bummer." But here, in the group chat, she was crafting an entirely different narrative. She wasn't just my friend. She was the long-suffering martyr, burdened with the impossible task of finding love for her perpetually difficult, impossibly selective best friend. I wasn't a person, I was her project. And my failure to cooperate was being broadcast as a personal failing, a character flaw that everyone was now pitying her for having to endure. My vision blurred. For years, I had accepted Sophia's help as a sign of her love. Her constant critiques, her unsolicited advice, her need to be at the center of every decision I made, I had interpreted it all as caring. I had defended her to others, even to myself. "That's just Sophia," I'd say with a shrug. "She just wants what's best for me." But staring at the screen, the truth settled over me with a chilling weight. This wasn't help. This was control. This wasn't concern. It was a performance. She wasn't trying to build me up. She was using my perceived loneliness to make herself look compassionate and heroic to our friends. The carefully constructed image of our perfect friendship, a structure I had spent over a decade helping to build, crumbled into dust in the harsh, fluorescent light of a bathroom stall. The betrayal was worse than the disastrous date itself. I stayed in that bathroom for another 10 minutes, my mind racing. My first instinct was to charge into the group chat, guns blazing. To type out a furiously detailed account of the date, to defend myself, to expose Greg for the condescending bore he was and Sophia for her two-faced commentary. But my thumbs hovered over the keyboard, paralyzed. What would that accomplish? It would be my word against hers. It would look defensive, emotional, exactly like the difficult person she was painting me as. Sophia was a master of social spin. She would twist my anger into further proof of her point. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my expression haunted. No. I would not give her the satisfaction of a public meltdown. I would not play her game. I returned to my desk, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I sent a single, private message to Sophia. "Hey, just saw the group chat. No need to feel bad, really. It's okay." Her reply was almost instantaneous, sickeningly sweet. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry if you saw that. I was just venting. I just worry about you, you know? I want you to be happy." The word honey made my skin crawl. She had never called me honey before. It was a term of condescension, a pat on the head for the poor, lost little thing she was pretending I was. "I know," I typed back, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "I appreciate you." That evening, I went home to an empty apartment. The silence, which usually felt peaceful after a long day at the firm, now felt suffocating. It echoed with the ghost of Sophia's words, "Too picky, meant to be alone." I sank onto my sofa, pulling a blanket around my shoulders, and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. I cried for the friendship I thought I had, for the trust I had so freely given, and for the sudden, gut-wrenching realization that one of the core pillars of my life was a sham. My phone rang an hour later. It was Sophia. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text popped up. "Just calling to check on you. You seemed quiet. Let's get brunch tomorrow, my treat. We can dissect the date, figure out what went wrong." Figure out what went wrong. The implication was clear. The thing that went wrong was me. I was the variable that needed to be solved, the faulty equation that needed correcting. My fingers trembled as I typed a reply. "Can't tomorrow, have plans." Oh, a new guy already. The winky face emoji felt like a jab. "Something like that," I responded, and then I turned my phone off. I sat in the darkness, the city lights twinkling outside my window. For so long, Sophia had been the narrator of my life, and I had foolishly let her. She held the pen, and she was writing me into a tragedy of her own design. I felt a flicker of anger ignite in the pit of my stomach, a small, hot flame that began to burn away the fog of my sorrow. She thought she knew my story. She thought she was in control of the plot. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. She had forgotten that for the past 6 months I had been writing a secret chapter of my own, one she had no idea even existed. And in that chapter, I was not the lonely, picky protagonist she described. I was happy. I was loved. And I was not alone at all. The thought settled in my mind, not as a comfort, but as a weapon. And for the first time all day, a slow, determined smile spread across my face. The game was not over. I was just about to make my move. Our friendship hadn't always been this toxic. Or perhaps it had, and I had simply been too close to see the rot beneath the surface. I met Sophia in my sophomore year of high school. I was a quiet, studious girl buried in textbooks, and she was a whirlwind of social energy who decided, for reasons I never understood, that I was going to be her best friend. She pulled me into her orbit, taught me how to navigate the treacherous waters of teenage social circles, and gave me a sense of belonging I had never known. In return, I was her anchor. I was the one who helped her study for finals when she'd spent weeks planning a school dance. I was the one who talked her parents into letting her go on the senior trip after she'd been grounded. When her first real boyfriend broke her heart, she cried on my shoulder for a week straight, and I brought her ice cream and bad movies until she smiled again. I was her rock, her confidant, her unwavering support system. I had sacrificed late nights, skipped parties I might have enjoyed, and rearranged my own schedule more times than I could count, all for her. I considered it the price of a profound friendship. As we grew older, the dynamic shifted so subtly I barely noticed. Her life became a series of grand, dramatic performances, and mine became the quiet, stable backdrop against which she shone. She got a flashy job as a social media manager, curating a perfect life online that was all bright colors and clever captions. I pursued architecture, a slow, methodical passion that required years of grueling study and late nights hunched over drafting tables. She celebrated her promotions with champagne-fueled parties. I celebrated passing my licensing exams with a quiet, exhausted dinner at home. The primary antagonist in my life wasn't a person, but a narrative that Sophia had been carefully crafting for years. And at the center of her recent storytelling was Daniel. Daniel was a lawyer in the same building where Sophia's agency rented a floor. He was handsome, yes, but it was more than that. He had a calm, steady presence that was the complete antithesis of the chaotic world Sophia inhabited. He was kind, whip-smart, and had a dry wit that could make me laugh until my sides hurt. He'd occasionally join our friend group for happy hour, and from the moment Sophia laid eyes on him, she was determined to make him hers. Her pursuit was anything but subtle. She would accidentally run into him by the elevators, bring extra coffee to his office floor, and tag him in flattering group photos on social media. She spoke about him constantly, dissecting his every word, analyzing his every polite smile as a sign of hidden affection. To our friends, she was the plucky heroine in a romantic comedy. To Daniel, it was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. He was always gracious, but he kept a polite, professional distance. Sophia, of course, interpreted this as him being shy or intimidated by her success. "He's just playing hard to get," she'd announce to our friends over brunch. "He's probably never met a woman as direct and confident as me." Meanwhile, I was quietly getting to know Daniel on my own terms. We had bonded one evening at a mutual friend's barbecue over a shared love for old jazz records and a disdain for cilantro. It started with emails, then texts, then quiet coffees far away from our usual haunts. There was no drama, no games, just a simple, beautiful connection that grew stronger with each passing week. We knew, instinctively, that bringing our budding relationship into the light of our friend group, and specifically under the glare of Sophia's obsession, would smother it before it had a chance to breathe. So we kept it to ourselves. It was our secret, our peaceful haven. Sophia's interest in my love life intensified in direct proportion to Daniel's lack of interest in her. It was as if she couldn't stand the thought of me finding happiness while she was still chasing hers. She began her campaign of setups. Each one was worse than the last, men who were emotionally unavailable, financially unstable, or just plain strange. After each failed date, she would sigh dramatically and tell me, "I'm trying, Alice, I really am." The setup with Greg was the final, most calculated move. She had met him at a marketing conference and knew exactly what he was like. She described him to me as ambitious and intellectual, conveniently leaving out arrogant and misogynistic. She didn't want to set me up with a great guy. She wanted to set me up with a nightmare so she could reinforce her story, that she was the benevolent friend and I was the broken, picky project who couldn't be fixed. It was the perfect way to deflect from her own romantic frustrations and recenter the group's attention and sympathy on herself. And it had worked perfectly. Until now. The weekend after the disastrous date was a turning point. After turning off my phone on Friday night, I spent Saturday in a state of quiet fury. The hurt was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was now being overlaid with something new, resolve. I would not let Sophia write the final chapter of our friendship. I would not let her define me to the people I cared about. I was an architect. I built things. It was time to draft the plans for my own vindication. On Saturday evening, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought it might be Sophia, come to perform another act of concerned friendship. I peered through the peephole and felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was Daniel. When I opened the door, his smile faded as he took in my appearance. "Hey," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "You okay?" I tried calling. I stepped back to let him in, a lump forming in my throat. I turned my phone off. Long story. He set a bag of takeout on my counter and wrapped his arms around me. I leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of his cologne. In the safety of his arms, the story of the date and the group chat messages tumbled out of me. I told him everything, the condescending comments from Greg, the public humiliation from Sophia, the pitying texts from our friends. Daniel listened patiently, his expression hardening as I spoke. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry, Alice," he said, his voice low and firm. "That's not a friend, that's a saboteur." "I know," I whispered. "I think I've known for a while, but I didn't want to see it." "So what are you going to do?" he asked. My first instinct was to blow up the group chat, I admitted. To tell everyone she's a manipulative liar and that I've been secretly dating the man she's been chasing for a year. Daniel winced. That would be dramatic. Exactly. It would be messy and ugly, and she would find a way to make herself the victim. Alice was so jealous of my bond with Daniel that she concocted this whole story and stole him from me. I mimicked Sophia's breathy, dramatic tone perfectly. Daniel nodded, a grim understanding on his face. She would too. We were quiet for a moment, the gears turning in both our minds. And then, an idea began to form. It was audacious, a little theatrical, and utterly perfect. My new apartment, the one I had poured my heart and soul into designing, was almost ready. The closing was in 2 weeks. I was planning a housewarming party. "What if we wait?" I said slowly, the plan solidifying as I spoke. "What if I let her think she's one? I'll play the part of the sad, lonely friend. I'll let her and everyone else go on believing her story." A slow smile spread across Daniel's face as he caught on. And then, I said, my own smile matching his, "we send out an invitation. A beautiful, professionally designed digital invitation for my housewarming party. And at the bottom, as the hosts, it will list 2 names, Alice and Daniel." His eyes lit up. "Oh, that's good, that's really good. It's not an accusation, it's just a fact, elegant, clean, undeniable." "It's a social checkmate," I said, feeling a thrill of empowerment. The plan was our secret weapon, the key piece of leverage we held. Our hidden relationship, once a shield to protect our privacy, was now being forged into a sword. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in supreme self-control. I saw Sophia for a coffee, where I played the part of the mopey singleton to perfection. I let her drone on about the importance of putting yourself out there and lowering your expectations. I nodded and sighed in all the right places. "I just feel like I'm going to be alone forever," I said, looking down at my cup. Sophia patted my hand, her eyes gleaming with a sick kind of triumph. "Don't worry," she said, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "I won't give up on you." Behind the scenes, Daniel and I were a whirlwind of activity. We finalized the closing on my new home. We spent the next weekend moving boxes and ordering furniture. We worked together, a seamless team, laughing as we assembled a complicated bookshelf and ordering pizza to eat on the floor of our future living room. Our secret made everything feel more precious, more exciting. This wasn't just my house, it was going to be our home. He'd officially proposed a month ago on our 6-month anniversary, a quiet, perfect moment on a weekend trip to the coast, and we had decided to keep the engagement under wraps until we were ready. Now, we had the perfect occasion. I spent hours designing the invitation. It was a work of art, a minimalist architectural design that featured a stunning photograph of the new apartment's view over the city skyline. The text was simple and elegant, detailing the date and time. And at the very bottom, in a clean, modern font, were the words that would detonate Sophia's entire narrative. "Hosted by your friends, Alice Carter and her fiancé, Daniel Murphy." On a Tuesday morning, with Daniel sitting beside me at our new dining table, I pulled up the contact list for the Weekend Warriors group chat. My finger hovered over the send button. "Ready?" Daniel asked, squeezing my hand. "Ready," I said, and with a deep breath I pressed send. The silence that followed was deafening. For a full 3 minutes my phone remained inert. I imagined the notification popping up on screens across the city. I pictured the moment of confusion, the rereading of the names, the slow, dawning realization. The trap was sprung. Then my phone erupted. It wasn't the group chat. It was a private call from Sophia. I let it ring, my heart hammering against my ribs. It stopped, and immediately a string of texts began to flood my inbox. Sophia, Alice, call me right now. Sophia, what is this invitation? Is this a joke? Sophia, Daniel Murphy, your fiancé. Sophia, you have to explain this. This is not funny. Daniel read the messages over my shoulder. She's panicking, he said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Her story is falling apart, and she can't control the fallout. I took a steadying breath. I couldn't let her drag me into a frantic, private argument where she could twist my words. The reveal needed to be as clean and public as the invitation itself. I decided to respond, not to her, but to the group chat, where the first tentative messages were just beginning to appear. Friend 1, whoa Alice, congrats. Had no idea you and Daniel were even a thing. Friend 2, this is amazing news. Fiancé, you kept that quiet. I typed a calm, simple reply for all to see. Thank you guys so much. Yes, we wanted to keep it to ourselves for a while and just enjoy it. Can't wait to celebrate with all of you at our new place. I deliberately used the word our. The group chat exploded with congratulations, heart emojis, and exclamation points. The narrative shifted in an instant. I was classic Alice, the picky, lonely spinster. I was Alice, the happily engaged woman who had simply valued her privacy. The pity they had felt for me, carefully cultivated by Sophia, was instantly transformed into happiness and excitement. Sophia's private texts grew more desperate. Sophia, why are you ignoring me? You're making me look like an idiot. Sophia, how could you do this? You knew how I felt about him. Sophia, everyone is asking me questions. You need to fix this. Fix this? The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. She wasn't sorry for lying. She wasn't hurt by my secrecy. She was furious that her manipulation had been exposed. Her primary concern was her own image. This was the first major confrontation, and I was winning it by refusing to engage on her terms. She wanted a screaming match. I was giving her polite, public contentment. Her poorly executed threats and frantic demands were only making her look more unstable. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was from Megan, one of my closest friends in the group, who had been mostly silent since the invitation went out. I hesitated, then answered. Alice, Megan's voice was cautious. Hey, I need to apologize. For what? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. For buying into it, she said, and I could hear the genuine shame in her voice. Sophia went on and on about how worried she was about you after that date with Greg. She made it sound like you were being so difficult, and I fell for it. I feel like a terrible friend. Looking back now, it all seems so obvious. The way she talked about Daniel, and then this, it all makes sense. This was the first crack in Sophia's armor. It wasn't just that her lie was revealed. Her entire pattern of behavior was being re-examined by our friends. She called me about an hour ago, Megan continued, and she was a mess. She was trying to spin this whole story about how you must have been seeing Daniel behind her back for ages, trying to steal him from her. It didn't sound right. It sounded desperate. This was Sophia's next move, to recast herself as the victim of a grand betrayal. But her frantic attempts to regain control were clumsy and transparent. The calm, happy evidence of my engagement stood in stark contrast to her chaotic, bitter accusations. Megan, it's okay, I said, and for the first time I felt a sense of genuine lightness. I appreciate you calling. For the record, Daniel and I have been together for 7 months. We got engaged last month. There was never anything between him and Sophia. He was just being polite. I believe you, she said immediately. I'm so happy for you, Alice, truly, and I'm really sorry. The conversation ended with a promise to get together soon. I hung up the phone, a small, triumphant smile on my face. Sophia's frantic lashing out was having the opposite effect she intended. Instead of turning people against me, her obvious lies were only confirming her fraudulent nature. The foundation of her social standing was cracking, and the party hadn't even happened yet. In the days leading up to the housewarming party, Sophia's desperation escalated into a full-blown smear campaign. She couldn't undo the fact of my engagement, so she tried to poison the well, reframing the narrative from one of her benevolent friendship to one of my treacherous betrayal. She sent long, rambling messages to individual friends, crafting a tale in which I was the cunning villain who had stolen the man she loved. "I confided in Alice for months about my feelings for Daniel," she wrote to one friend, a message that was promptly forwarded to me. "I see now that she was just gathering information. She used my vulnerability against me. I feel so used." The problem with her story was that it was built on a foundation of lies, and lies have shallow roots. Daniel had never given her an ounce of romantic encouragement. Their interactions had been public, polite, and professional. Everyone had seen it. Her confiding had been a one-sided monologue of delusion that most of our friends had politely tolerated. Daniel and I decided we needed to get ahead of her story before the party. We couldn't let her turn our celebration into a trial. We didn't need to build a case in a legal sense, but we did need to present the irrefutable truth to our closest friends. We invited Megan and two other trusted friends, a married couple named Ben and Chloe, over for a quiet dinner before the big event. We cooked for them in our new kitchen, the atmosphere warm and intimate. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, I took a deep breath. "I know this whole thing with Sophia has been a lot," I began. "And I know she's been saying things. We wanted you guys to hear the truth from us." Daniel took my hand. "My first real conversation with Alice was at your barbecue last summer, Ben," he said. "We talked about jazz. I don't think Sophia was even there at the time. We started talking more after that, but we both knew how intense her interest in me was, and frankly, it made me uncomfortable. We kept things quiet because we didn't want the drama. We wanted a chance to see if what we had was real without an audience." Chloe nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Her fixation on you was always a little much. She set me up with Greg 2 weeks after Daniel and I got engaged," I added quietly. "We were on a trip to the coast. It was just for us. When I came back, she was insistent about this perfect guy she'd found for me. Now I realize she must have suspected I was happy about something, and she couldn't stand it. The setup was designed to remind me and everyone else that I was supposed to be the lonely one." I then showed them a few key pieces of evidence, not as an attack, but as a confirmation of the timeline. I had a photo on my phone of me and Daniel from our second date, time-stamped nearly 8 months ago. I had the receipt from the jeweler for the engagement ring, dated 6 weeks prior. These weren't accusations. They were simple, chronological facts that proved our relationship predated Sophia's most recent, intense campaign and that our engagement was sealed before her act of friendship. Ben shook his head, looking disgusted. "So she set you up on that awful date knowing you were already with Daniel, or at least suspecting you were happy?" "We think so," Daniel said. "It was a power play. She wanted to reassert her control over Alice's narrative." The spell was broken. Seeing the simple, undeniable proof laid out calmly, without anger, solidified what they had already begun to suspect. Sophia wasn't a victim. She was a manipulator who had been caught. The day of the housewarming party arrived. I was a bundle of nerves, but Daniel was my rock. "No matter what happens, no matter what she does, we just stay calm," he said, straightening his collar in the mirror. "We are the hosts of a happy event. We are celebrating our home and our future. She is the uninvited storm cloud. We don't have to let her rain on our parade." About an hour into the party, just as the apartment was filled with the cheerful buzz of conversation and laughter, the doorbell rang. It was Sophia. She stood on the threshold, dressed in a severe black dress, her face a pale, tight mask of fury. She had clearly come expecting a confrontation. I had prepared for this moment. I smiled warmly, as if her presence was the most natural thing in the world. "Sophia, I wasn't sure if you'd make it," I said, my voice light and breezy. "Come on in." My complete lack of fear or anger threw her off. She had come armed for a battle, but I was offering her a glass of champagne. She stepped inside, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the scene. Our friends laughing, the beautiful space, and Daniel, who walked over, slid his arm around my waist and smiled politely at her. "Sophia," he said, his tone perfectly level, "glad you could come." The sight of us together, so clearly happy and united, was the one thing she couldn't spin. It was the irrefutable proof that her story was a fantasy. Her face contorted for a second with a flash of raw hatred before she smoothed it back into a semblance of composure. The second, more powerful confrontation was about to begin, but this time it would be on my turf and on my terms. Sophia moved through the party like a shark circling its prey. She tried to pull people aside, to whisper her version of events into their ears, but she found no purchase. Our friends, armed with the truth and their own observations, offered her polite but cool responses, refusing to be drawn into her drama. They would nod, say congratulations to them, and expertly steer the conversation back to a neutral topic. Her power was gone. She was no longer the narrator. She was just a guest peddling gossip that no one was buying. I watched her from across the room, my heart steady. The nervous fear I felt earlier had been replaced by a serene, almost detached sense of clarity. I saw her not as a monster, but as a deeply insecure person whose sense of self was built on controlling the people around her. The inevitable showdown happened near the kitchen island, which was laden with food and drinks. Sophia, having failed to rally any support, finally cornered me while I was refilling a bowl of chips. Daniel was on the other side of the room, deep in conversation with Ben. "So this is it," Sophia hissed, her voice low and venomous so only I could hear. "This is your big victory lap." I stopped what I was doing and turned to face her, my expression calm. "It's a housewarming party, Sophia." "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped. "You lied to me for months. You schemed behind my back. You let me pour my heart out to you about Daniel, and you were with him the whole time. You are a terrible person and a worse friend." A year ago, those words would have shattered me. Now, they felt like nothing more than static. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You never poured your heart out to me, Sophia," I said, my voice even and clear. A few people nearby quieted, sensing the shift in tone. "You performed a monologue at me. There's a difference. And I never lied. I just lived my life privately, a life you weren't entitled to know about." "I was your best friend," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "Were you?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Was it a best friend's job to set me up with a man as awful as Greg? Was it a best friend's job to immediately run to our friends and call me picky and broken? Was it a best friend's job to build a narrative where you were the saint and I was the charity case?" Each question landed like a stone, and she had no answer. Her face flushed a blotchy red. The conversation around us had now completely died down. All eyes were on us. This was the public showdown she had wanted, but it wasn't going her way. Daniel appeared at my side, placing a steadying hand on my back. He didn't say a word, but his presence amplified my own strength. "You knew," Sophia finally spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You knew I wanted him." I finally allowed a small, sad smile to touch my lips. "No, Sophia, you wanted the idea of him. You wanted a prize to show off. You don't know the first thing about who Daniel really is. You never once asked him about his life, his passions, or his dreams. You just talked about how good he would look on your arm." I turned my body slightly to address the silent, watching crowd. "I'm sorry that our private happiness has caused such public drama. That was never our intention. Daniel and I found something special, and we protected it. When we were ready to share it, we did. That's all there is to it." I then looked back at Sophia, my voice softening with a final, cutting dose of pity. "The story you told everyone wasn't about helping me. It was about you. It was always about you. And I think, deep down, everyone knows that now." The silence that followed was thick with judgment, and none of it was directed at me. Sophia looked from face to face, searching for an ally, a flicker of support, but she found nothing but closed-off expressions and averted eyes. The architecture of her social standing had been publicly condemned. With a choked sob of pure rage and humiliation, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. For a moment, the room was perfectly still. Then, Chloe raised her glass. "To Alice and Daniel," she said, her voice ringing with sincerity, "and to your beautiful new home." A chorus of "to Alice and Daniel" erupted through the room. The tension broke, replaced by a wave of warmth and support. Friends came up to hug me, to squeeze my arm, to whisper, "We're so happy for you." The celebration resumed, louder and more joyful than before. The storm cloud had passed, and the sun was shining brighter than ever. In the weeks that followed the party, the social fallout for Sophia was swift and decisive. She was quietly removed from the Weekend Warriors group chat. Brunch invitations ceased. Her attempts to organize get-togethers were met with polite excuses or outright silence. She hadn't been excommunicated in a dramatic blaze of glory, but had simply faded away, her influence extinguished by the light of the truth. Her downfall wasn't a punishment inflicted by me, but a natural consequence of her own actions. She had built her social world on a foundation of manipulation, and when the keystone was removed, the entire structure collapsed. The last I heard, she had taken a new job in a different city, a move she announced on social media as a fantastic new opportunity to grow her brand. It was a classic Sophia spin, an attempt to frame her social exile as a powerful career move. No one was fooled, but no one commented either. We just let her go. My own life, in contrast, bloomed. The friendships that remained were stronger and more authentic than ever before. The apologies I received were heartfelt, and I accepted them with grace. I understood that Sophia's manipulation had been subtle and practiced over many years. Forgiveness felt easier than holding onto resentment. My relationship with Daniel, now free from the shadows of secrecy, flourished in the open. We settled into our new home, our days filled with the simple, beautiful rhythm of building a life together. We hosted small dinners, went for long walks, and spent Sunday mornings reading side by side on the sofa, the sunlight streaming through the large windows I had so carefully designed. One crisp autumn evening, about 2 months after the party, Daniel and I were standing on our balcony, looking out at the glittering cityscape. "Do you ever feel bad," I asked quietly, "about how it all ended with Sophia?" He was quiet for a moment, sipping his tea. "I feel bad that it had to happen," he said thoughtfully. "I don't feel bad that it did. You didn't expose a friend, Alice. You liberated yourself from a bully. She was dimming your light for years, and now, look at you." I followed his gaze to my reflection in the glass. I looked different. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my calm. Panion for years was gone. In its place was a sense of peace, a quiet confidence that came not from external validation, but from within. I was no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the architect of my own. The housewarming party had not been an act of revenge, I realized. It was an act of reclamation. I had reclaimed my narrative, my friendships, and my own sense of self-worth. Sophia's ultimate consequence wasn't losing her friends or being publicly humiliated. It was that she had to go on being Sophia, constantly searching for new people to control and new narratives to spin, while I was finally, truly free. Daniel wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and I leaned my head against his chest. The city hummed below us, a symphony of a million different stories. And for the first time, I felt like mine was finally being told in my own voice, and it was a story of peace, love, and a home built on a foundation of unshakable truth.